Hello everyone, welcome and welcome back. It's been far too long since I've recorded one of these. Strictly, definitely following behind schedule for what I have planned. But no worries, I'm continuing with this Harry Potter Rewind series. Still on book one. I don't know how copyright and all this stuff works, if I'm allowed to show this on camera, so I'll leave it at that. We're on chapters 5 and 6 for this video. A little bit worried about the length here because these chapters are quite long. Well, the book itself is only that thick, so not that long. None of the chapters are that long, but these two are a lot longer than the first 4 we've had so far. So I'll try to keep my thoughts brief, or not. Maybe this will just be a 2-hour video. In any case, we're jumping into chapter 5. This is Diagon Alley. So this is really exciting. We're getting into the wizarding world now. So to start with, Harry wakes up the next morning. He hears a tapping on the window, and then there's an owl. Hagrid's kind of roused from his sleep by the tapping sound, and he's a little bit annoyed and tells Harry that he wants to be paid for delivering the paper and to go ahead and pay him from the money in his pockets. And this is the first sort of mention we have of wizard money or wizard currency, or the idea that there would be a different currency at all. I don't remember very clearly in the films. There must be... I have a visual memory of the different denominations of the wizarding currency, but I don't know if that's something I conjured up myself, or there must be at least one shot somewhere in the first or second movie showing that. Hagrid tells Harry to give the owl 5 nuts, and he tells Harry that the nuts are the little bronze ones. We don't get too far into the whole currency thing because Hagrid's still pretty much half asleep, but we'll get a little bit more about that further down the line as they make their way to Diagon Alley and Gringotts. Gringotts. Hagrid tells Harry, after paying the bird and Harry realizing that there's wizard money, he starts to get worried that he won't be able to afford all the things he needs to go to Hogwarts. And Hagrid informs him that his parents would have left him something and that they would need to go to Gringotts Wizard's Bank to retrieve it, or to retrieve some of it. And Harry, of course, is quite surprised by this. I don't know why, but it kind of stuck out to me that Hagrid specifies, because Harry's like, wizards have banks, and Hagrid specified that there's just one bank, Gringotts, and it's run by goblins. Something about Harry Potter that's always struck me is very much that the wizarding world exists in, or lives within, the real world, so to speak, the Muggle world. And you'd have to think that the ratio of wizards to non-magic human beings, to magical human beings versus non-magic human beings, is very disparate. Like the total I imagine the total population of wizards in this world is very low. Like, they seem to be able to conduct all their affairs within our ecosystem, but still remain undetected. I don't know. The fact that there's only one wizard bank is maybe Hagrid doesn't know of any others. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like Gringotts just has a vast and probably unfair monopoly. I don't know. Hagrid basically tells Harry a bit about Gringotts, how secure it is, and how ridiculous it would be for anyone to try to rob it. And they get ready to leave, and Harry's wondering how Hagrid got here. Hagrid tells Harry that he flew there, but he's got to limit his use of magic now that he has Harry. And so they get in the boat They get in the boat to leave this little shack. That's on I don't know what they're on, like some kind of a rock island or something. Um, but then Hagrid still uses a bit of magic to sort of propel them forward because he doesn't want to row. But yeah, while they're in the boat, Harry learns a bit more about the magical world via Hagrid and also the Daily Prophet, the newspaper that he's reading. And he talks about how Dumbledore was wanted for minister. He says they wanted Dumbledore for minister. I don't know who exactly they are. If he means it's the people in general or people in government. But he said he'd never leave Hogwarts. And therefore, Cornelius Fudge got the job, I guess. Only other person running or something like that. And Hagrid seems to... Hagrid expresses his opinion that he's not... That Fudge isn't really up to the job, and he regularly contacts Dumbledore for advice. Very interesting, the little note there that Dumbledore would never leave Hogwarts. I imagine for Hagrid, he's perceiving that as he loves it too much. He loves that job, that position. I wonder if some of that has to do with the fact that he's waiting for Harry. That's probably more likely it. Plus, I mean, I guess maybe government is just not what he's into. But I would imagine he's waiting for Harry because he could. I don't know. We'll leave it at that for now. So Harry's looking a little bit more closely at his list of requirements. So there's various items of clothing for his uniform, as well as a lot of books, obviously. But we get our first mention here of Bathilda Bagshot, who will go on to play a bit more of a role further down the line. I mean, I don't think J.K.R. would have been thinking that far down the line here, but I guess it's nice to fill your story with characters seen and unseen who can be sort of called upon later, called up for duty to play a part in your story. That's pretty cool to me. So we have Bathilda Bagshot, who's the author of A History of Magic. Who else have we got? Newt Scamander, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. He's the author for that. Yeah, it's a bunch of other books that I'm not overly interested in. It also says here for equipment, he'll need 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2, 1 set glass or crystal files, 1 telescope, and a set of brass scales. And it says students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. That's a very interesting thing. It says may also bring. I would assume that would mean if you already had a pet and it was one of these animals, you were free to bring them along. But people seem to be going out and getting these for school. And I understand owls because, I mean, it's basically like a delivery system or their method of communication. But the cats and the toads, as far as I know in this story, don't really do much. And Ron ends up bringing a rat. Is the rule saying you're only allowed to bring an owl or a cat or a toad, or are they advising that these are 3 animals that might be of help to you? I'm a little bit confused on that one. Because Ron brings a rat, and it doesn't seem to be not allowed at school, which is fine. Maybe it's just not best for, because the animal, it's weird. It's like they're pets, but they're also like, I guess there's like a utilitarian aspect of it. So, for instance, in Transfiguration class, you might use your owl, cat, or toad as the object for transfiguration. There might be other things as well. I don't know. It just seems like if you're gonna get a new animal, it might as well be an owl. Probably be the most useful. Let's see. So they get to London, and Hagrid ushers Harry into what Harry describes as a grubby-looking pub. And so they're at the leaky cauldron, and Hagrid proceeds to not so conspicuously announce that he's on Hogwarts business, and he's kind of putting his hand protectively around Harry, kind of drawing attention to him, if you ask me. Well, I think that was actually what he was intending. So Hagrid proceeds to not introduce Harry, but sort of allow Harry to be introduced to all the people in the pub. They all come up. They all come up to him, shaking his hand, telling him welcome back. I guess people are like kind of aware that he's been raised in the Muggle world. This scene here seems to go on a little bit longer than it does in the film, or at least JKR does a pretty good job of putting us or placing us in Harry's position, and this seemingly unending line of people coming to greet him, almost sort of pay their respects. And some people even going back into the line to shake his hand again. Harry does recognize one of them. He's a guy who introduces himself as Daedalus Diggle, and he was the one who bowed to Harry. I don't know how much earlier, maybe a couple years earlier. I think that was mentioned in either the first or second chapter, when Harry was out with his aunt and uncle, and someone bows to him, and they're pretty flustered about that, so it wasn't very helpful, Daedalus, but thank you. But Daedalus is pretty excited that Harry seems to have recognized, or at least remembered him. I think Daedalus might also play a role later on in these books, because it's just a very, I don't know, it's a name that stands out to me. I feel like he plays a role later on, maybe from the 5th books and beyond, or maybe even the 4th. Oh, he also meets Professor Quirrell here, of course. Let's see. He's described as a pale young man who made his way forward nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. No mention of a turban as of yet. When is this? This is Harry's birthday, so July. Yeah, so they still got like a whole month until school starts for Quirrell to go on his journey, I guess. He's already quite nervous here. Nervous and twitching. Yeah, and stuttering a lot as well. Anyway, Hagrid introduces him, letting Harry know that Quirrell will be one of his teachers at Hogwarts, and Quirrell lets him know. Actually, Harry asks what he teaches, and he lets him know he'll be his Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Anyways, finally, Hagrid manages to tear Harry away from the crowd and pulls him through the leaky cauldron out to an alley. And, I don't know. Relative to how he's been raised, Harry's quite, seems to be a fairly well-adjusted kid. And I thought it was interesting that Hagrid would put him in that situation seemingly deliberately. No, actually deliberately, because, let's see, once they get out of the leaky cauldron, he says to Harry, told you, didn't I? Told you you was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling. Okay. Yeah, basically, he's kind of showing, not really showing Harry off, but letting Harry sort of bask in his reputation. Which I think, I don't know. I guess I can see how from the way Harry's perceived to the way Hagrid found him. Those are two very disparate things. The way Harry's life is with um the Dursleys, and he just like maybe he felt he was cheering Harry up, like just really wanting him to know that he is valued, even though that's maybe not the right kind of being valued. I just feel like it's something Dumbledore wouldn't have done, or maybe he would have. No, or at least not that early on. Um, yeah, I just kind of felt a little bit like throwing him to the wolves, but they were nice enough people in the Leaky Cauldron, so I guess it didn't matter all that much. But let's see. Oh, so I guess Quirrell has been on his adventures. Harry asks Hagrid a little bit more about Quirrell, and Hagrid says that he took a year off to go study. He took a year off to go study and get some like first-hand experience, and he came back all twitchy and stuttery. Anyways, we get to a wall in the alley, and Hagrid starts tapping a few bricks with his umbrella, and voila, there is Diagon Alley. As soon as they walk in, Harry is obviously very overwhelmed. Looking at all the shops, they pass by apothecaries, owlries, broom shops, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, but they go straight to Gringotts first, obviously, because Harry is skint. He's got nothing on him, and he's got a lot to buy. Let's see. Adjust the lighting here a bit. Anyways, yeah, so they approach Gringotts first. I forgot how sinister Gringotts had the ability to feel. There's something about walking in there. I guess if you have something of value, that could give that could be very reassuring. But just generally speaking, it's like the whole atmosphere. The atmosphere itself is a deterrent to would-be thieves, right? At least that's how it feels. Anyways, so they approach the counter. Hagrid lets them know that Harry needs to withdraw some money from his vault. He also hands the goblin, who is Griphook. Very interesting. We'll be seeing him. We'll be seeing more of him later. He lets Griphook know that he's got a letter from Dumbledore. He hands that over, and that seems to be fine with him. It's very interesting because up until this point, we're talking a lot about security and whatnot, and it's interesting to me that a letter from Dumbledore would suffice to withdraw an item like that, and the only item in this vault. But I don't know, maybe there's like a password in there or something. Also, Hagrid had the key to Harry's vault, which is odd. I'm assuming Dumbledore had it? I don't know. Harry's parents were members of the Order of the Phoenix, though, so maybe someone in the Order, I doubt, maybe even Dumbledore himself had the ability to, I guess, hold onto that on Harry's behalf. Seems kind of weird to me. And after this point, it doesn't really mention, but afterwards, did Harry keep the key, or is it enough for Harry to be present for for his vault to be open for him to use? Because he goes to Diagon Alley almost every year for new school supplies. How does he withdraw money? We'll see when we get there, I guess, in the books. If it... I don't remember 2 very much, so it might be in there. Hagrid declines to tell a Curious Harry what is in Vault 713. And when they reach Harry's vault, when they reach Harry's vault, it's described. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. And Hagrid says, "All yours." I've always wondered if it's that he was left a lot of money, or if it's just a lot of money for an 11-year-old kid with no responsibilities. You know what I mean? Like maybe an adult would be able to. Maybe Harry's parents, if Harry's parents were alive, that wouldn't have been much. Well, it probably also would have been generating interest all this time, I guess. Does Gringotts do interest? Maybe. Maybe not. But either way, it's definitely more money for an 11-year-old kid than it would be for an adult, right? I guess I just always wondered if the Potters were rich or just okay. They're probably just okay. And now all their money is left to their 11-year-old son, as opposed to the Weasleys with, what, 7 or is it 9 kids? Yeah, anyways. Alright, so they proceed from Harry's vault to the other one. Hagrid retrieves what he needs, and they leave Gringotts back out into the alley, to the street, to the shops. In the first place Hagrid drops Harry off is at Madame Malkin's, and says Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. I actually have like a really vague memory of this. It's quite odd that it's not something I ever think about when I watch the films. This would have been the first place that Harry meets Malfoy, although he doesn't know who Malfoy is, and I don't believe I don't believe Malfoy introduces himself properly here. He doesn't give a name, either first or last. So Harry's just talking to this boy who he knows is also going to be at Hogwarts. I guess right away he gives off a vibe that Harry's not really interested in, because you'd think this would be a good opportunity for him to make a friend even before school starts. But Harry says that he's strongly reminded of Dudley as Draco talks to him, so I guess he wouldn't have made any effort there. Interesting to me that Hagrid just drops Harry off there. I know he was feeling sick after the cart ride at Gringotts and he needed to go, I don't know, gather himself or whatever. But you think Harry doesn't know exactly what he's doing, right? So I don't know. I would have thought Hagrid would have stuck around a little bit, make sure he was situated before leaving. I as an 11-year-old, would not have been pleased to have been dumped at the shop. But it seems alright. Madame Malkin seems to know what she's doing, because she measures Harry for his robes, and things seem to be alright. Draco's parents also dropped him off there, but Draco would have known a little bit more of what was going on. He's also the first one to speak to Harry about Quidditch. Harry has no idea what he's talking about. Malfoy also laments a little bit about first years not being able to have their own brooms. What would any student at Hogwarts need with a broom? You couldn't really. I mean, you could, but you could fly around the castle, like on the inside, but it'd be very disruptive to like traffic in general. I don't think it'd be the most efficient way to travel. And then outside of like the building itself, I don't know, maybe there's just like a lot of space on the ground so you could just play around if you wanted to. Fields and stuff. I don't know, it doesn't seem like it'd be very practical. It'd be like I guess people do this all the time. People have their skateboards at school, but you can't use them indoors. You're just like lugging them around unless they can fit in your locker. And it's a boarding school, so they don't have lockers. I don't know. It just seems like not the best thing to be lugging all the way to school. It doesn't seem like it'd be very useful on campus. This would also be the first Harry's hearing about the Hogwarts houses, as Malfoy's telling him that he will be in Slytherin, as all his family have been. He also immediately says, "Imagine being in Hufflepuff." I think over the years, over the years, I got the impression that Hufflepuff kind of randomly became the sort of meh house. But no, that's not something that came out of nowhere. That's written straight into these books. JKR giving them a tough start there. That's the first we're hearing about Hufflepuff, and it's already seeming like not the greatest. Although it is coming from Malfoy, who in this entire little section is not seeming like the greatest person. So we don't necessarily have to take his word for it. Harry's just kind of trying to hang in there, pretending like he knows what's going on. Hagrid shows back up. Interestingly enough, Draco has heard of him. Draco doesn't have any siblings, right? How much are you able to know about Hogwarts without having attended? Anyway, Draco's wondering why Hagrid's with Harry, and Harry says it's because his parents are dead, and Draco kind of apologizes nonchalantly, not really caring. But takes the time to confirm that Harry's parents were one of their kind, which is to say, witches and wizards. And this is the first that we kind of hear of the categorization of sort of types of magical folks. Because Draco is saying, I really don't think they should let the other sort in. Basically non-magical folk, or muggles, muggle-born witches and wizards. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get their letter. I think that is an interesting thing. I don't see why Harry couldn't have received a letter a year in advance and sort of like prepare him, like Muggleborns in general. Like, at what point does it start to, for Muggleborns, does it start to show? At what point does their magical ability start to show? Or do they just have the proclivity? I don't know if that's the right word. Do they have the ability to learn magic, but not necessarily? Like, we got instances in earlier chapters where throughout Harry's life he was performing magic unwittingly. So when Aunt Petunia cut his hair shorter than he would have liked, it grew back overnight. Is that something Hermione or any other Muggleborn would have been able to do? Or is there just something in them that is seen to be do they just show something in them that shows an ability to learn and do magic, and therefore they're welcomed to a wizarding school where they're able to learn? And if you don't invite them to a wizarding school, if they don't learn about magic, would that eventually fade? Or would they just be random magic wielding folks running around with no idea of how to use it or control it? I think my headcanon is that they don't have the ability to do magic until they've learned it. They have a proclivity, a penchant towards magic that could be nurtured and fostered if they're told about magic and they go on to learn it. But prior to that, they're not actually able to perform magic. And if they're not invited to learn magic, if they're never told, that would eventually fade. They wouldn't just have magic. That's my headcanon. So if basically if Hermione had never been invited to Hogwarts, whatever magic in her would have just disappeared over the like a couple of years, and she never would have known about it. She wouldn't. And she never would have known. She never would have developed an ability to perform magic, and that proclivity towards magic in her would have faded. That's my headcanon. We're moving on. Oh wait, before we move on, that's an interesting thought because that means that the wizarding community could grow their numbers by seeking out magic, by seeking out magically predisposed muggles. What a thought. Voldemort was going about it completely the wrong way. Let's see. So, Hagrid brings Harry some ice cream, I think. Hagrid brings Harry some ice cream, and Harry starts to ask him questions about what he spoke about with Malfoy. What's Quidditch, what are the houses, and all that kind of stuff. And Hagrid does his best to explain. And then he too, which Hagrid is now a more credible source than this rude boy in the robe shop. He too confirms that Hufflepuff is not necessarily one of the better houses. How sad. They go get books from Flourish and Blots. They go get books from Flourish and Blots. Harry comes across an interesting book written by a Professor Vindictus Viridian. And it's a book on how to bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges. Hair loss, jelly legs, tongue tying, and much, much more. That's gotta be like a pen name, right? Vindictus Viridian. To write a book like that. That can't be his real name. As you would expect from an 11-year-old who all of a sudden has inherited a whole bunch of money, Harry tries to buy a solid gold cauldron, which Hagrid talks him out of, kind of reminding him that his list says it needs to be pewter. That's interesting, because that's such a kid thing to do. I don't know, it just... Like, you think of Harry as this very, sort of humble kid who maybe would never... I feel like movie Harry would never even think to do that. But this Harry is just... Book Harry is very... He's just an excited kid. He's been sort of plucked out of the misery of the world that he's used to. And everything around is just very exciting. So yeah, why wouldn't he want the gold? A solid gold cauldron. Although, gold is quite, like, pliable, right? Probably melts at a low temperature. I don't know if that would be the best for potions. Well, I don't know why that actually exists. Maybe it's like decorative. Hagrid buys Harry a snowy white owl as a birthday present. He says he doesn't like cats because they make him sneeze, and that toads went out of fashion years ago. And that Harry would be laughed at if he bought a toad. That doesn't spell... That's not great news for Neville coming up in a little bit. He says, I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're dead useful. Carrier mail and everything. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Interesting that toads were ever in fashion. Like, maybe that's the only reason they're even on the list. It's just people like them for some reason. And they were like, yeah, sure, bring a toad. Toads are kind of gross to me. Anyway, they move on. It's the last shop for them for the day. Harry describes it as narrow and shabby, with peeling gold letters over the door that read Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. Now that really stood out to me because it says makers, Ollivanders, makers of fine wand. It's also Ollivanders with an S on the end, plural. I always thought it was an apostrophe S. And I just always thought Ollivander was some like really old guy, like as old as like Nicholas Flamel, either keeping himself alive somehow or just being really old. I don't know. Is I'm just realizing that it's probably a shop that's been passed down through generations of Ollivanders rather than just being the one Ollivander. I don't know why that never clicked before. Anyways, but yeah, 382 BC. He can't be that old. Um, Seemed like a really old, like rundown looking shop, but they've got such a good reputation that they don't even have to bother with looking good or flashy. So Ollivander seems to be quite old, frail, like guy. Soft spoken guy with like inaudible footsteps because he seems to sneak up on both Harry and Hagrid. Harry says he has wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the shop. And he seems to recognize Harry immediately. He says, "You have your mother's eyes." There we go again. And it seems only yesterday that she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10 1/4 inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. That guy's got a really good memory. Or maybe it's the fact that it's the Potters and their whole story. Those would maybe like stick in your memory for longer. I don't know, but it's interesting. He seems to unless there's other wand makers in the shop, whether they're members of his family or not. It seems odd to me that he seems very in tune with people with all the wands, but I'm assuming the pale eyes. I'm assuming those are cataracts. Is that what we're talking about? Like he can't see properly. I wonder if he's got like some other like magical sense that lets him. I don't know, or maybe he's just very well practiced at his job. We're losing the sun. Just that. It's fine to me. Anyways. Oh, interesting enough, I was thinking just last chapter that no one refers to Hagrid by his first name, but as soon as Ollivander spots Hagrid, he says, "Oh, Rubius, nice to see you. How nice to see you again. Oak, 16 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it?" I just think it's kind of cool that it's almost like everyone is a wand to him. Like most people struggle putting faces to names and names to faces. With Ollivander, it seems like the wand comes first, and that kind of helps him remember the person. Oh yeah, he remembers his father as well. After talking about Lily's wand, he says, "Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, a little more power, and excellent for transfiguration." What a nice touch there. I wonder if she knew at this point what that sentence kind of implies. I don't know if I'm making this up, but I feel like I heard that she kind of had a general idea of like the first 3 books in mind. So maybe she did know. But the idea of James's wand being particularly good for transfiguration is kind of cool. And that's where he mentions, "Well, I say your father favored it, but it's really the wand that chooses the wizard." I think for how much the movie scene is condensed, I think they sort of moved the dialogue around pretty well for that scene. It's very well written and adapted for that scene. Anyways, Ollivander goes ahead to measure him for his wand. Ollivander measuring Harry for his wand was quite interesting because I think he's got like a magic tape measure that's doing it, and it's very interesting because it says it measures Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, around his head, between his nostrils. It kind of feels like when you like sign up for an account for something, and and all of a sudden you start getting like all of a sudden you start getting like emails and like random phone calls from like telemarketers and stuff. That's what the measurement here kind of feels like. Like you probably just need like his arm and maybe his full height, but it just goes on to take everything else that it could possibly get. Um, yeah, but they try quite a few wands. Harry barely like picks them up before Ollivander snatches them back. And he seems to be getting more and more excited with each wand that Harry tries. I do wonder, or I suspect that Ollivander had some idea of what wand would be for Harry, but maybe wanted to try as many others as possible. Maybe try to avoid that situation, or I don't know. Maybe he just didn't want to jump to that conclusion. Like try as hard as possible to find a different wand, and it seemed to come down to the idea that it had to be this one. And he mentions that it's an unusual combination to start with. It says it's a holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Yeah, all the wand cores are quite interesting because we have unicorn hair, phoenix tail feathers, and then heartstring of dragons. Now, maybe I don't know, maybe heartstring refers to something else, but it sounds like it's an actual piece of a dragon's heart. That seems to be the only core that a creature would have to die for. It's actually not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. But yeah, maybe dragon heartstring means something else in magic terms. I'll have to look that up. And of course, the wand, the phoenix feather wand, the holly and phoenix feather works perfectly. And Ollivander goes on to explain that its brother gave Harry the scar on his head. And what was that one? It was a 13.5 inches U. Sounds like a very long wand. And Ollivander reminds Harry again, it's very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. And he says, I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. What a lot of pressure to put on an 11-year-old. The wand cost him 7 galleons, and they left Ollivander's shop. So they're walking through London with sort of the haul that they've gathered for the day. Especially the owl is looking very out of place. And they stop for something to eat, and Harry's kind of distracted, which you would be. Like, you wouldn't be able... I imagine everything would feel different. Nothing would feel the same after an experience like that. It's been less than 24 hours now since Hagrid found him, and his whole life is just like upside down. Yeah, it says Harry kept looking around. Everything looked so strange somehow. Harry's also still worried that he knows nothing about magic, and he's got to go to the school in a few weeks. And Hagrid tells him not to worry. Everyone starts at the beginning, and that he'll learn fast enough, and that he's sure Harry will be one of the best. He helps Harry onto a train, and before he lets him go, he passes him his tickets for Hogwarts. He's to be at King's Cross Station on the 1st of September, and he tells Harry all the details are on his ticket. And as the train pulls out of the station, it says Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window, but he blinked and Hagrid had gone. Now, my first thought there was apparition. I'm not sure if Hagrid can apparate, but it could have been like a portkey or something else. But I think on first read, you would have just thought, I don't know if I would have thought it was anything magical. I would have thought it was more of like a Batman effect. Um, yeah, and that's it for chapter 5, Diagon Alley. It's a very eventful chapter. I just thought JKR does a really good job of giving you that sense of anxiety and wonder in this chapter. All the different, there's just like a ton, an influx of characters in here. All the people in the Leaky Cauldron, all the shop owners, the people in the shop, um, the like bank attendants at Gringotts, or tellers, I guess you'd call them. Yeah, there's just so much more happening here than like the first 4 chapters were like a slow build up of people, and then this fifth one is just like so much information, and there's not a moment of feeling. Obviously, you can feel bored with all the new stuff going on, but there's not a moment of feeling like overwhelmed, like this is too much. You feel just as excited and sort of discombobulated as Harry does. And I think that's something J.K.R. does a really good job at for this entire series, just really putting you in Harry's headspace. Yeah, and it was just really fun to revisit because it did feel like when I was reading this for the first time, it was just you feel like you're in it, like you're in in the world, or like you can imagine being in the movie somehow. Like I felt excited just to like be getting to each consecutive page. Like I could like prolong my visit to this universe. The more I kept reading. Oh yeah, so you could definitely see how this took off with kids all around the world. But yeah, that's it for chapter 5. We can go on to 6. All right, here we are, chapter 6, the journey from platform 9 3/4. I don't know how quickly I'm going to be able to get through this one, but here we go. So pretty much since Hagrid left Harry after since Harry returned home from his trip to Diagon Alley, the Dursleys have all just been avoiding him. I don't know if they're like scared or, well, they're most likely scared. Um, but you would think that in that case, the thing to do would be to treat him well, but it seems like they've just gone the route of like not interacting with him at all, which I think Harry was kind of fine with at first, but then things started to get like boring because no one's talking to him. But he jumps into his school books because it's quite funny. Usually, you don't ever want to read your textbooks, but I guess he knows absolutely nothing about magic, and so it's all fascinating to him. So he's been reading a lot of that. Um, and literally the night before school's due to start, he figures that he's going to need a ride to the train station, so he goes down to talk to his uncle. And Vernon is kind of like only half paying attention to him. Once he walks into the living room, Dudley kind of screams and runs away. I just thought that was an excessive reaction, but we get an explanation for that a little further down. But Vernon actually says something that kind of makes sense to me. After he agrees to take Harry to the station, Harry says thank you, and Vernon says, funny way to get to a wizard school, the train. And he makes a joke, magic carpets all got punctures, have they? Yeah, that it does seem like a funny way to get to wizard school, but it is one of the things I like a lot about this series, is that the wizarding world is like firmly entrenched. It's like firmly entrenched in the muggle world. It's like they're a, a modern civilization that has developed like on a it's like they're a modern civilization that's developed on kind of like a parallel track to what the rest of the muggles have. um I just like that there's not a over I just like that there's not an overabundance of magical solutions to every situation that occurs. I think that feels more real in a way. Like I think inventions either technological or magical come out of necessity. And yeah, I don't know. I think we're gonna hit this topic several times throughout the books, over and over again. So maybe if my thoughts are more clearer at those times, I'll maybe explain that more. But I do love that there's a train to the Hogwarts. Maybe I'll explain more. I'll try to explain more as my thoughts become more clearer on that topic. But anyways, Vernon asks Harry, where is the school anyway? And Harry realizes he doesn't know. He just pulls out his ticket and says, I just take the train from platform 9 3/4. And Vernon and Petunia are just tickled by this. And he's saying there's no platform 9 3/4. And Harry's insisting that it's there on his ticket. And all of a sudden, the Dursleys are absolutely excited to take Harry to the train station the next day. Almost like they just want to... They're excited about something not working out for him. Like somehow this might have all been a prank. And Harry's just going to be stranded at the station. Anyways, he's excited for Harry to be proven wrong about the platform. And he says the only reason why he's taking Harry anyway, is because he already has to be in London. And the reason he's going to London is to take Dudley to the hospital to get the tail removed before he has to start school at Smeltings. So that would be the pig's tail that Hagrid gave him. I completely forgot about that. Forgot that was a thing. And it's no wonder why Dudley ran from the room when Harry entered. That's absolutely traumatizing. I probably would have been the same. Also, why wait so close to the start of the school year? Maybe that's just the first appointment they could get. Alright, so the next day, so Harry hardly sleeps. The next day they get to King's Cross, and Vernon is sort of happy to push Harry's trunk and other paraphernalia up to the platforms. He gets there and he says, well, there you are, boy. Platform 9, platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, do they? And Vernon just seems like overly excited about this. And then he says, have a good term, and they just walk off and they all get into their car and drive away. Like, if they were really so sure that there was some kind of mistake and that there was no such thing as this platform, and that this whole like situation, this whole setup wasn't going to work out, why would they just leave him there? Did they figure they'd go to the hospital, come back and see him just still standing, and just have a good laugh about that, and then go home? The Dursleys are weird. But Harry's left stranded on the platform with all his belongings, and he's very much starting to panic. You can only imagine, like, you're an 11-year-old in a busy train station. I imagine it would be the same feeling of like losing your parent, like at a mall or like just any kind of store if you wandered off and couldn't find them. That's the only feeling I can kind of equate to the situation that Harry's in right now, that I've personally experienced. The clock's ticking closer and closer to the departure time. It's got about 10 minutes. He's thinking Hagrid most likely forgot to tell him something. Maybe there was a secret way to get into the platform, just like there was with Diagon Alley. And all of a sudden he hears someone exclaiming, packed with muggles, of course. And of course that word stands out to him. And he sees a family of, I don't know how many. There's quite a few of them, seemingly in a hurry. This was interesting. The mom of the group asked the question, now, what's the platform number? And a little girl responds, 9 3/4. This could be for the benefit of the readers, just to reinforce to them that these are people that could help Harry out. But also, it kind of implies that 9 3/4 was not always the platform for the Hogwarts Express. Or perhaps that there are more wizard platforms. And 9 3/4 is just the one we hear about because that's where the Hogwarts Express is. And we're only ever following Harry to Hogwarts. Are there more wizards platforms at King's Cross and possibly other train stations? Or is it just the one to Hogwarts and maybe it's not always 9 3/4? Maybe they've recently upgraded, built a new platform, and they've moved to 9 3/4. Or there's just several and they try to dedicate one to the Hogwarts Express and it was recently changed from another one to 9 3/4. I don't know. I just found that interesting. Might have been a throwaway line that I guess maybe didn't mean much then, but means a lot now, having completed the story. Anyway, Harry's trying to watch what they do. He sees a couple of the kids like make their way onto the platform, but each time he's not able to figure out what exactly happened or how they were able to get there. They seem to just disappear. And Harry, he makes a move that I don't know if I'd be able to at 11 years old. At 11 years old, I think I'd be a lot more nervous or just like too shy to approach anyone. But he is kind of desperate at this point. The train's almost. He really doesn't want the train. He really doesn't want to miss the train. He really doesn't want to go back to the Dursleys. So he approaches and says, "Excuse me," very politely. And basically asks, "How do I get to the platform?" And the mother tells him to walk straight at the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 and don't stop. Don't be scared or you'll crash into it. So it's like if you're not going the right speed or something, it'll be solid. How embarrassing. In any case, Harry makes it onto the platform, following her instructions, and immediately he's trying to get on the train. It's a busy platform. He looks behind him, sees an iron archway, which obviously could not be seen from the other side. And he starts like trying to move his stuff onto the train. He passes a round-faced boy who's saying, "Gran, I've lost my toad again." And the old woman replies, "Oh, Neville." So I think that's our first introduction to Neville Longbottom. Good to see a Neville. We also have a boy with dreadlocks who was surrounded by a small crowd, and they say, "Give us a look, Lee." And so we're saying hello to Lee Jordan as well. Lee Jordan's a fun character. I don't remember everything about him in the books, but I remember really enjoying him, and there really not being enough of him in the film. So it'll be good to be reintroduced to him as I go through this. As Harry is like struggling to get his trunk onto the train, he is offered some help, and he accepts by one of the red-headed boys from the other side of the platform, I guess. He accepts and he calls over Fred. He calls over someone named Fred, which would be one who looks just like him, and they both go ahead and load Harry's trunk onto the train for him, which he thanks him for. They immediately point out his scar, asking him what it is, and they recognize him as the one and only Harry Potter. This is not something I remember at all. I don't know why, it's just interesting. It always felt like Ron was... It always felt like Harry was Ron's friend first, and he happened to fit very nicely in with their family. I was a friend to the family. But he really kind of met a good chunk of the Weasley clan all at once. Fred and George even interact with him before he ever meets Ron. Yeah, I've always thought of Fred and George as Ron's older brothers, but they definitely are friends, especially once you get to the 3rd book and up to the 5th. There's a lot of connections there with the Marauders map and Harry giving them a loan to start their shop. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, I think there's a different dynamic in my mind with Harry's connection to the Weasley family having like reread this chapter, and just the way he meets them and connects with them pretty much straight away. It's different to how I was thinking of it before, with him just being Ron's friend to start with. But yeah, it'll be interesting analyzing that going forward. So we'll continue. As everyone's like getting loaded on the train, Harry's basically eavesdropping on the Weasleys. I guess this isn't really important to recap, but basically he gets to hear the Weasleys as a family, just as themselves, and he can tell that they're pretty nice people. The mom is like warning Fred and George not to berate Harry about his scar, not to stare him or anything, or treat him differently. She seems to have a lot of empathy for him for being at the train station alone. I feel like they could have organized someone to like pick Harry up from his aunt and uncle's house, even if it was just like a wizard taxi service. Because there is one, I think, that gets mentioned in the next book, actually. Anyway, we also meet Percy here. He has immediately changed into his Hogwarts robes, and he has his prefect's badge on, and the twins are giving him a hard time about it, but he seems rather proud. Anyways, the train's about to leave. The mom kisses all her kids goodbye, except for the youngest, who's not old enough yet. Little girl's quite upset that her brothers are leaving, but yeah, the train takes off, and Harry's kind of looking forward to this new adventure. And then in walks none other than the youngest boy from the family. I think it's very interesting here. Now, as the train takes off, Harry is thinking to himself that he doesn't know what he's going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. It's just one of those sentences that, even as a kid, like really captures you. It's funny because if only you could see into the future and realize how good you had it at that, or realize how good I had it at that time. Yeah, but it just makes you feel like I don't know, like just there's adventure out there, and wouldn't it be great to go find it? Anyway, Ron makes his way over to the compartment that Harry's in, and asks if he didn't mind if he sat there. The twins come back and introduce themselves properly as Fred and George, as well as their little brother Ron, who hadn't yet introduced himself. But then they immediately leave because Lee Jordan has a tarantula somewhere further up the train. A giant tarantula. Why is that a thing? Despite his mother's advice, Ron can't help but ask Harry a little bit more about himself, whether he really is Harry Potter, and about the scar and all the rest. But then he kind of catches himself and remembers what his mother said, and kind of tries not to ogle Harry the whole time. But yeah, they spend the train ride kind of getting to know each other. Ron tells Harry a lot more about his family, about his two older brothers, Bill and Charlie. A little bit more about Quidditch, I think. Ron's a bit embarrassed by. He seems quite proud of his family, but also a little bit embarrassed by the fact that they don't have a lot of money. Harry, of course, doesn't mind. He has a lot of money now, but up until a month ago, you would have thought he was in a family of 7 kids as well, from the way he ate and was dressed, from the way he was fed and was dressed. So it's not at all a problem for him. Ron mentions that his robes are his brother Bill's old robes. His wand is his brother Charlie's old wand, which is quite odd. It makes it sound like Charlie just like upgraded his wand the way you might upgrade like a laptop or something. And I wonder if that's a thing, especially considering the wand chooses the wizard. You'd think it'd be quite difficult to find another wand that works as well or similarly or better than the one you already had. Maybe it wouldn't be that hard, but it's like the fact that you're already used to one. I wonder if you'd be looking for something else. Like, for instance, Ollivander said Lily Potter's wand was very good for charm work. So maybe if you had a wand that was very suited to you, but also to herbology, and you wanted to work more on your charms, you might get another wand that also suited you, but was better suited to charms. That's very interesting. I hadn't been thinking of wands in this way at all. It also says that his rat is Percy's old rat. Now, I do remember that the rat, by book 3, the rat would have been with the Weasleys for 12 years. I didn't consider that it wasn't always Ron's, which makes sense. Why would you get like a 1-year-old, a rat, a pet rat? I don't know. It's just interesting that the rat would have been with Percy first, and then Ron. But yeah. So the idea of Charlie upgrading his wand or just getting another one. I don't know. Do wands like fade? You know how like you can have a phone that's in perfect working order, but the battery's like doesn't hold as much charge. Can that happen with wands as well? I just think it's interesting that, especially because it mentions a little bit further down the line that Percy was able to get new robes this year because he made prefect and they were so proud of him. But I just feel like Ron is like beginning his magical education. Um, I don't know what the difference in costs to new robes versus a wand is, but I feel like he needs a new wand more than Percy needs a new set of robes. You know, like that's like starting like a high level math class like calculus or something, and using an old hand me down calculator where some of the buttons don't work, or they're like finicky and you have to like push them in a certain way to make them work. Like it will work. You can get the work done with the calculator, but it would be better if you had a new one. Um, and if they couldn't afford it at all, that's fine. But why buy new robes if you could have gotten a new wand for Ron? Um, just a thought. Yeah. But Ron's talking about how all his things are hand-me-downs, how useless Scabbers is, Scabbers being the rat. And then his ears go pink, and Harry can kind of see that he feels like he's saying too much about his family. Oh, Harry's also quite nervous about the fact that he doesn't know a lot about the wizarding world and just like the social rules and anything about magic in particular. And Ron kind of reassures him that there's loads of people who come from Muggle families, which he understands that Harry has, even though his parents were a witch and wizard, but he's been living with his Muggle family for the past 11 years or 10 years. No, 11 years. He says there's loads of people who come from Muggle families and they learn quick enough. Anyways, snack cart comes along. Harry buys a ton of stuff because he just wants to try everything and because he can afford it for the first time in forever and for the first time in ever. And he shares that all with Ron, who seems to have a lumpy sandwich that's got corned beef in it, and apparently he doesn't like corned beef, but his mom may have forgotten or given him the wrong sandwich. Maybe one of his other siblings has a sandwich. Anyway, Harry encourages him to have some of his haul. There's pumpkin pasties, cakes, and candies. They seem to forget all about the sandwiches. And Harry also tries some chocolate frogs, and Ron immediately is interested in the cards. This is interesting because having read this all those years ago, I would not have known who Agrippa and Ptolemy were. I think, I probably would have just thought that we were like made up wizards' names, but I don't know exactly who they are. I feel like they're like Greek philosophers. Um, I guess uh, JKR is co-opting them here to be wizards, which is fine. But yeah, Ron is looking for a card for Agrippa and Ptolemy, and Harry gets an Albus Dumbledore card, which seems to be not a difficult one to get, like one that exists in abundance. Not one of the more rare cards. But Harry's happy enough because he knows nothing about anyone, but he recognizes the name most likely from his school letters. Also, Hagrid talking about him. Um, and his card says Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945 for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling. I love how she always adds like something random and wholesome and sweet about Dumbledore. It's like there's always like something about how like great and formidable he is, and then some random bit of information about him. I don't think we ever get anything further regarding the uses of dragon's blood in this series, or at least not that I remember. And an early mention of Grindelwald. I don't know what I would have put if I would have made any note of the fact that he defeated Grindelwald in 1945. Definitely would have known about World War II. I don't know if I knew like dates and stuff at 11 years old. They try some Birdie Bots every flavored beans. That goes about as well as you would expect. Neville comes in looking for his toad. A lot of this plays out similarly to the way it does in the film, so I won't spend too much time on it. Although, this isn't about the movie, so maybe I'll spend as much time as I need. Neville comes back with another student at a later time, right as Ron is trying to turn his rat yellow with a spell that he got from Fred and George, which doesn't seem to be a real one, or at least not very useful. It's interesting that she comes back with Neville to this carriage. It's almost like Neville's gone up and down the train, asking about his toad, and maybe this girl has like disapproved of the way he's gone about it. Maybe he's a bit too timid, too shy, not speaking up. So she's like, "All right, we're making the rounds again, and I'm going to speak for you this time." Anyways, so towards Ron, she says, "Are you sure that's a real spell? It's not very good, is it? I've tried a few simple spells just for practice, and it's all worked for me." There's a lot of this in this first book, which like students using magic outside of school, and I feel like I was able to square that with the knowledge of them not supposedly not being able to. I know with like wizard families, it's easier because there's adults around, and it's probably hard to differentiate between what magic is being performed by the adults versus the children. But I don't know about for Hermione. Maybe they feel like they haven't given her the rule book yet, so she's fine for now. I don't know. Maybe it'll be addressed later or not. I don't know. Yeah, but her practicing magic before school even starts. She says, I've learned all our course books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough." I think that will be enough, Hermione. But it makes sense, not just her being smart or like loving school or anything, but it makes sense being nervous for the start of school, having just learned about the wizarding world, wanting to know as much as possible. So I don't even think that's a nerd thing there. I don't think I would have memorized all the books, so she introduces herself as Hermione Granger, and the boys introduce themselves, Ron Weasley and Harry Potter, to which she immediately says, "Are you really? I know all about you, of course. I've got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century." All very nice. But I think those are probably weird things to say to someone, especially on a first meeting. Oh my god, I've got to wrap this up. I'm like starting to lose my voice. I think we're almost good. Yeah. She tells them they need to get dressed because they'll be at the school soon. Ron and Harry talk a little bit more about wizard things, Quidditch, dragons, Gringotts, the Daily Prophet, all this kind of stuff. Oh, they get some more visitors. So this is slightly different from the film. His first like proper run-in with Draco Malfoy, which was at the top of the stairs, right in front of the Great Hall in the movie, if I remember correctly. Here that whole bit of dialogue happens on the train because Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle come into Harry and Ron's compartment, and basically they're just there because they heard Harry Potter's on the train. So they're just being nosy. And Harry recognizes him from Madame Malkin's shop. And Draco pretty much immediately tries to tell Harry that Ron's not the person you want to be making friends with. But considering that Harry has already compared Malfoy to Dudley in his mind when he first met him at Diagon Alley, and he's not showing any improved behavior here, especially with regards to someone who he's seems to be getting along very well with. Harry kind of rebuffs Draco's offer of friendship, so to speak. I think at that point, it's probably from this point on that keep wanting to say Malco, that Malfoy sees Harry as like a not an enemy but a nemesis, like an opposite. Because Harry pretty much doesn't take his Draco sort of offers his hand like a handshake as friends or whatever, and Harry doesn't take it. Anyways, Hermione comes back, warns them again they need to get dressed, which they do. Train comes to a stop, and they're told to leave their luggage on the train as it will be taken into the school separately. He and Ron are quite nervous. I guess anyone would be nervous about a new school, yeah. But there's something about Hogwarts that seems pretty I don't know what's the word. Not isolated. Like you don't know much about it. It's like I don't think there's like open houses for 10-year-olds to come check out whether or not they want to go to Hogwarts. I think it's just you decide if you're going or not, and you show up and yeah, take everything as it comes because everyone seems super nervous about what's happening around them. Alright, so they get off the train, huge crowd, and they hear a voice calling for all the first years, and it's Hagrid, of course. And he greets Harry. Harry's probably really happy to see a familiar face, at the very least. They follow Hagrid down some steps, through the dark, over to a lake with some boats. And Hagrid's telling them no more than four. And Hagrid's telling them no more than 4 to a boat. I wonder how many first years there are in total. How many boats that would take. So we end up with Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione in a boat. Pretty good boat for main characters going forward in the story. And once they're in, the boat sets sail, seemingly, I guess, propelled by magic. which would have been what Hagrid used on the boat in the where he first found Harry, from where he first found Harry. And the boats took them to what Harry describes as an underground harbor, which actually sounds pretty cool. In my head, I'm imagining like where you get on the boats for the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Walt Disney World. Similar, maybe like energy, similar like vibes or like lighting is what I'm imagining. Anyways, they get out of the boats in the underground harbor, and Hagrid's checking all the boats, making sure no one's left anything behind, and he finds Neville's toad, which he returns to him. I don't understand how, unless Neville found it on the train, took it on the boat, and forgot it again. But I feel like he was still looking for it. I don't understand how it would have ended up in the boat. Unless it wasn't in the boat that Neville was in. It was just in another boat. Maybe it was like riding along on another student. In any case, Neville gets his toad, Trevor, back, and he's quite happy about that. I don't know if he likes the toad or he's just upset about his or he's just worried about his grandmother being upset with him for losing it. More about Neville's toad later in the next few chapters. I'm a few chapters ahead in reading, and there was something interesting that I noticed while doing this review about what Hagrid said about toads. Anyways, I won't get ahead of myself. Let's see. They're out of the boats. Neville's got his toad. They walk up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. Hagrid checks one more time to make sure everyone's there. He raises a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. And that's where we leave off for chapter 6. That was the journey from platform 9 3/4, which leads right up to the castle doors right outside Hogwarts, or on Hogwarts grounds. Absolutely great chapter. This one, I think this one takes a huge shift in the sense that we're getting entrenched more in student life here. I feel like the train journey is a good like literary device for JKR to use to not only is like Harry and even Ron, some of the other first years, trying to come to terms with what they're going to be facing by the time they get off this train. But it's a good chapter long sort of like preparation for the reader as well. So we're moving away from this is the real world, and then there's like this weird, slightly weird things happening in it, to we're now moving into a space where the Muggles are the other sort of the not normal ones. I don't know if I'm making sense, but like we're getting used to. We're going from sort of the primary group of people being Muggles, mostly represented for us by the Dursleys, and then having weird things happen in that space around them, with trips to the zoo and different things, and Hagrid showing up to. Now we're on the train. We're meeting a lot of new students. We meet Hermione, Neville, Ron, George, Fred, Percy. Harry even gets a glimpse of a wizard family, because even when he met Draco at Madame Malkin's shop, it was just Draco on his own. His parents were off doing something else in Diagon Alley. But he first sees the Weasleys, or most of the Weasleys, with their mother, and I guess that would be like the first parental figure who was not like disapproving of magic that he would have witnessed. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a good space of time. You have a lot of chat with him and Ron in a weird way. They're both like reassuring each other that everything's going to be all right. They're both very nervous about the start of their first year at school. Yeah, I guess there's not too much to talk about on the train. It's really just kind of a getting to know you kind of thing, and Harry's witnessing more about the Wizarding World. Like more trivial things, everyday things, like the sort of snacks they eat. More about like their Quidditch and stuff like that. From Ron, who's approaching it just from Ron's who's approaching it just from his perspective as a kid, as opposed to someone like Hagrid telling Harry about um the Wizarding World. Like there's a lot more weight to it because Hagrid's older, and I mean he's got like all the good and the bad mixed in with it. Like he knows about the times with like Voldemort and all of that. But anyways, yeah, not too much to say about that. On the next couple chapters are going to be really interesting because we're going to be at school now, on school grounds. Um, oh, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. Almost forgot we meet them as well in this chapter formally. Formal, formal, formally, formally. Um, yeah, I guess I've been talking for ages now. There's no need for me to sit and think of things to say. I'd like to think that I touched on all of those as we went through the chapters. But yeah, yeah, I think that's it. Um, I've been Anywhere and Anything Else. This has been Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I can't believe I just said that. I've been Anywhere and Anything Else. This has been a rewind for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I look forward to the next couple chapters. See you then.